Hey guys, tonight we are stepping softly into the flour-dusted, button-saving, shoe-repairing, oatmeal-stretching, penny-counting world of raising children during the Great Depression, where your small child may want breakfast, your older child may need school shoes, your baby may have discovered coughing as a personal hobby, your husband may be out looking for work, your rent may be due with the emotional timing of a villain, and somehow everyone still expects you to produce clean collars, a cheerful voice, a respectable front room, and a supper that suggests the economy has merely misplaced its manners for a while. We are not talking about every family, every town, every farm, every city, every race, every region, every immigrant household, every working mother, every father, every child, or every kitchen that ever listened to a cupboard door open and hoped something useful would be inside. Life during the Great Depression varied enormously depending on whether you lived in a crowded city, tenement, a small rented house, a southern sharecropper cabin, a Midwestern farm, a Dust Bowl county, a mining town, a company town, a black neighborhood facing discrimination on top of poverty, a Mexican-American family watching relief and deportation politics with dread, an immigrant household trying to keep dignity in 2 languages, or a slightly better off family that had not lost everything but had begun looking at leftovers with newly formal respect. Some children still played, laughed, went to school, scraped their knees, read comics, argued over marbles, and believed with tremendous confidence that adults existed mainly to provide snacks. Some families found help from relatives, churches, mutual aid, neighbours, relief programs, gardens, public works, wages, odd jobs, school lunches, and the stubborn miracle of women who could turn potatoes, milk, flour, beans, scraps, and moral pressure into something that at least resembled dinner. But many parents discovered that childhood, which was supposed to be protected, had become a kind of household department, responsible for carrying coal, watching younger siblings, saving string, wearing patched clothes without complaint, and pretending not to notice when mother took the smallest portion again. Before we begin, you can like the video and subscribe if you enjoy drifting through the strange, inconvenient, very human corners of history, but only if you genuinely want to. No relief worker will appear at your door and ask whether you have demonstrated sufficient enthusiasm, although a neighbour may quietly notice if you have enough sugar to lend and then remember that information forever. And leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is there. There is something very comforting about knowing that while one person is falling asleep in Manchester, another is making tea in Manila, and someone in Ohio has just opened the refrigerator, stared into it with the full seriousness of a federal inquiry, and decided that cheese can still become a plan. The Quiet Hours is also on Spotify, so if you prefer to listen there while drifting off, you will find the link in the description. Now, dim the lights, put on a fan, pull your blanket up, and get completely comfortable. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench. Let today's bills, laundry, emails, dishes, grocery prices, unopened envelopes, mysterious crumbs, and the one drawer in your home containing batteries, string, expired coupons, and a key that belongs either to a suitcase or a former version of yourself become the responsibility of a child with a wagon, a mother with a pencil, and a household budget that has already fainted politely under the table. And before we begin, consider a few questions. How thin can a soup become before it is legally just warm encouragement? How many times can one pair of shoes be resoled before the cobbler begins asking personal questions? Is a school lunch still lunch if it is mostly pride wrapped in wax paper? How cheerful must a mother sound while explaining that an orange is for Christmas, not Tuesday? How many children can share one bathwater before cleanliness becomes a matter of optimism? Why did every family seem to own a button tin that looked ordinary but contained the entire domestic policy of the household? How long can a flour sack pretend it was always meant to become a child's dress? Can a father return from another day of looking for work and still smile at the baby without letting the room see what the street did to him? What is the correct expression to wear in a relief line when you are grateful, embarrassed, hungry, tired, and absolutely furious that gratitude has become part of the transaction? How much dust can enter a house before the house is technically part of the weather? How many times can a child be told to eat slowly before he realizes adults are not discussing manners but arithmetic? How do you keep a birthday festive when the cake is small, the candles are borrowed, and the present was made from something that used to be something else? What does it feel like to tuck children into bed when the roof leaks, the pantry is thin, the rent is due, and tomorrow has already written a list? Congratulations. You have just awakened as a parent in Great Depression America. The stove is cold, the children are warm under patched blankets, the kitchen smells faintly of soap, ashes, yesterday's coffee, and worry, and outside the window the morning is waiting with empty pockets. Naturally, everyone will still need breakfast. You wake before the children because the kitchen is easier to face before anyone has asked it for miracles. The room is cool, the stove waits with yesterday's ash, and the pantry shelves hold flour, oats, beans, maybe a little lard, maybe a heel of bread wrapped carefully enough to suggest it is valuable property. During the Great Depression, feeding children often meant turning breakfast into arithmetic without letting the children see the numbers. You measure oatmeal with the calm precision of a banker handling national reserves, add water with confidence, and hope that warmth will do some of the work that butter used to do. One child wants more. Another dislikes lumps, which is bold behavior from someone being sustained by credit, weather, and maternal restraint. You smile, stir, scrape, stretch, and understand that the day has begun not with a meal, but with a negotiation. The kettle begins to tremble on the stove, and that little sound feels almost official, as if the household has convened. And the first item on the agenda is how to make 4 hungry bodies believe that oats are a generous institution. You may have known lean mornings before the Depression, because many families did, especially farm families, immigrant families, black families shut out of decent wages, or working people who never acquired Wall Street to fail before learning thrift. But now the whole country seems to be sharing a very large, very badly managed breakfast table, and somehow the scraping spoon has become a national symbol without anyone asking the spoon how it feels. You think in portions before anyone sits down. The youngest needs enough to stay quiet until noon. The oldest is growing, which is financially rude but biologically committed. Your husband, if he is still at home and not already walking toward another place where work might not exist, needs food too, though he may insist he is not hungry with the noble foolishness of a man trying to donate his stomach to the children. You know this performance. You may perform it yourself. Parents become talented actors in hard times, smiling at coffee, praising crusts, calling a smaller helping plenty, and pretending they always preferred the part of the meal that stuck to the pot. The kitchen smells of damp ash, boiled grain, weak coffee, and the wooden cupboard that opens too often for what it contains. If you have milk, you use it carefully. If you have sugar, it appears like a visiting dignitary, briefly present and not to be questioned. If you have apples, dried fruit, molasses, or a little leftover gravy from supper, the morning may become almost festive, though festive is a flexible word when the national economy has entered the room wearing thin socks. In some cities, children go to school already hungry, their mothers hoping a charity kitchen, a teacher, a neighbour, or simple endurance will carry them through the day. In some rural places there may be eggs, milk, or garden produce, but little cash for shoes, flour, medicine, or taxes, proving that food and security are not always the same thing, however much a chicken may try to help. You set bowls down with ceremony, because ceremony costs nothing, and children are more likely to accept small portions when they arrive with confidence. They climb into chairs, hair rumpled, faces soft from sleep, feet swinging above the floor. One asks whether there is toast, another asks if there is syrup. The baby slaps the table with the optimism of someone whose financial opinions are not yet developed. You answer gently, not because the questions are easy, but because childhood should not have to understand commodity prices before losing its first tooth. You tell them to eat slowly. You say it is hot. You say there is enough. Sometimes there is enough, just not enough for everyone to stop noticing. A mother learns the art of moving around the kitchen while eating last, so the children cannot measure what she has not taken. A father learns to look at the window while pushing his bowl slightly away. An older child notices anyway because hunger teaches observation before spelling does. You may save the oatmeal water, scrape the pot, wrap the bread, turn coffee grounds into one more weak cup, and mentally assign every crumb a future. Nothing is just nothing now. Bacon grease is seasoning. Stale bread is crumbs, pudding, stuffing, or tomorrow's breakfast with a kinder name. Leftover potatoes are cakes. Soup is a place where vegetables go to be forgiven. Even the empty sack will later be shaken, folded, used, and respected. The children finish at different speeds, because children have no understanding of household pacing and will either inhale food like hired machinery or complain for 10 minutes about texture. You wipe a mouth, tighten a shoe, smooth hair, and answer a question about supper before breakfast has fully surrendered. That is parenting in a depression kitchen, one meal asking the next meal for a reference. By the time the bowls are washed, the room is warmer, the stove has earned its keep, and the children have accepted the morning as ordinary, which may be the greatest illusion you will create all day. The pantry is still thin, the rent is still due, the country is still in trouble. But for one small hour, you have turned oats, water, patience, and parental fraud into breakfast, and everyone has left the table believing this was the plan. You pack the school lunch on the kitchen table while the children stand nearby pretending not to inspect your hands. A lunch pail, a paper bag, or a cloth-wrapped bundle can reveal more about a household than anyone once revealed before arithmetic class. A sandwich may contain jam, cold beans, lard and sugar, a slice of yesterday's meat if fortune has briefly visited, or nothing so grand as a second slice of bread. In many schools, teachers learn to recognize hunger by the way a child watched other children eat, which is a terrible thing for chalk dust and multiplication tables to know. You tuck the food away carefully, as if neat wrapping can make it more generous. Your child takes it with solemn dignity, because children learn early when not to ask where the apple went. The kitchen is busy with small sounds, wax paper crackling, a knife scraping the last shine of fat across bread, a cup set down too softly, a chair leg complaining against the floor. Lunch should be simple, but in hard times, simple things develop committees. You consider what can travel, what will not spoil, what will not embarrass the child when opened, and what will still look like lunch after several hours beside a school book, a slate, and possibly one marble that has no official business being there. If there is bread, it is sliced with respect. If there is only one decent slice, you may fold it. If there is jam, you spread it thin enough to require faith. Apples, oranges, boiled eggs, cheese, cold meat, cake or cookies are luxuries in some kitchens and ordinary in others, because the depression did not distribute suffering evenly, though it did seem determined to visit widely and leave fingerprints. Another child may carry a biscuit, cold potatoes, a jar of milk if there is one, or an empty pail with an explanation already rehearsed. You know that schools differ too. Some communities, charities, and local relief efforts provide meals or milk programs. Some teachers quietly keep crackers, soup, or kindness in a drawer. Some children go home at noon if home is near enough and there is anything there to eat. Others sit through lunch period practicing the strange social art of not looking hungry in public. You have seen that expression before. It is the face of a child pretending to be interested in a pencil while every smell in the room becomes news. You try to prevent that face from belonging to yours. The older child watches while you wrap the sandwich. He does not say the portion is small. He may ask whether the little one needs more. This is either generosity or a warning that childhood is aging too quickly, and you do not thank the moment for its efficiency. You slip in a pickle if you have one, a cookie if a neighbour has brought some, or a folded note if paper can be spared and your handwriting is not too tired. Many mothers discover that presentation is its own small ration. A clean cloth, a neat fold, a tin pail polished at the corner, a biscuit tucked with care. These things tell a child that he has not been sent into the world carelessly. Poverty may enter the lunch pail, but it does not have to arrange itself badly. That, at least, is what you tell yourself while convincing a heel of bread to act complete. The pail itself carries history. It may once have held syrup, tobacco, lard, or something else entirely before being promoted to school service. It may be dented, scratched, inherited, or shared among siblings with complicated scheduling. A paper bag can be reused until it becomes more memory than paper. Wax paper is smoothed and saved. String is untied, not cut, because string has become a citizen of the household and should be treated with respect. Outside, other children will compare without meaning to. Children are not cruel every moment, but they are honest in flashes, and honesty near food can bruise. A child with a thick sandwich may not understand the child with none. A child with none may become very good at laughing first, talking loudly, trading marbles, claiming not to be hungry, or saying he forgot his lunch because forgetting is less shameful than not having. You give instructions that sound ordinary but carry weight. Do not lose the pail, bring back the cloth. Do not trade unless you mean it. Eat slowly. Do not throw away crusts. If someone else has less, be kind. If someone asks questions, answer politely and briefly, which is a large burden to place on a small person with jam on his thumb. The school bell will ring, and the children will file into rooms where maps still show a nation with clean borders, as if the real country is not currently crossing them in search of work, food, and rent. At noon, your child will open what you packed and learn again how home is doing. That is the difficult thing about a lunch pail. It leaves the kitchen carrying private arithmetic into public daylight. You watch him go, the handle swinging from his hand, and you hope the bread holds together, the cloth comes home, and nobody asks too loudly what is inside. The pail cannot lie, but with enough wrapping, it can whisper. You kneel by the back door with a child's shoe in your lap, examining the sole as if it has become a small legal case. The leather is scuffed, the heel leans, the toe is thinning, and the child inside it has chosen, with no regard for household finance, to keep growing. Shoes during the Great Depression could become family strategy, passed down, patched, resold, stuffed with paper, protected from mud, argued over, and saved for school, church, or the kind of public appearance where poverty had to stand up straight. Barefoot summers might be tolerated in some places, but winter, school rules, and respectability required footwear to perform far beyond its natural life. You polish the cracked leather and tell the child to be careful, as if childhood has ever respected a soul. The shoe smells of damp leather, dust, old polish, and the outdoor adventures it was specifically told not to have. It has crossed yards, schoolrooms, muddy roads, church steps, alleyways, fields, and possibly a puddle large enough to qualify as a local body of water. You turn it in your hands and press a thumb against the worn place. There is still life in it, if life is defined generously and without consulting a cobbler. In a better year you might replace it. In this year, you negotiate. A bit of cardboard inside can soften the truth. A piece of newspaper can keep the ground from introducing itself too personally. A patch, a tack, a repaired heel, a new lace made from something that used to be string. All of these become part of the family's footwear policy. Children, unfortunately, treat shoes as tools for being alive, not as delicate financial instruments. They run, climb, scuff, drag toes, kick stones, scrape curbs, and discover every patch of mud in the county with the devotion of explorers. You may warn them to stay clean, and they may nod with the sincere expression of people who will forget within 7 minutes. Shoe care sits at the meeting point of money, weather, school, and pride. A child can be hungry quietly, but a bad shoe speaks every time it enters a room. Teachers notice. Other children notice. Church ladies notice with the merciful sadness of people already arranging a donation in their minds. A pear from a charity box may fit badly, arrive too late, or carry another child's shape inside it. Hand-me-downs are useful, but only if the next child's feet agree with the previous child's history. Feet rarely consult the household before developing opinions. You may have one child who wears shoes down at the heel, another who destroys toes, and a third whose feet grow in sudden announcements just after you have declared the winter manageable. The family shoe shelf becomes a little museum of compromises. There are school shoes, Sunday shoes, work shoes, broken shoes kept for parts, shoes too large waiting hopefully for a future child, shoes too small that nobody can quite bear to discard, and one pair so worn that even thrift looks at it with concern. In rural families, children may go barefoot through warm months, which can toughen soles and spare leather, but a road can be sharp, fields can hide dangers, and town can be less forgiving than dirt. In cities, pavement is hard on shoes and harder on feet. Snow, rain, factory grime, coal dust, and crowded sidewalks have no sympathy for thin soles. You may rub polish into leather not merely to make it shine, but to make it last, to seal it a little against damp, to let the child walk into school looking cared for. That matters. Parents in hard times are often accused of caring too much about appearances by people who have never had survival inspected at eye level. A polished shoe says someone at home tried. It says the child was sent out with attention, even if the attention had to stand in for money. The child wiggles impatiently while you work. He wants to leave, play, run, ruin everything. You tell him again not to drag his toes. You tell him to step around puddles. You tell him to change into older shoes after school, though the older shoes look as if they have already heard enough of life. He listens with half his body, the other half already outdoors. Perhaps the older sibling stands nearby, remembering when those shoes were his, offering advice with the authority of a veteran. Perhaps the younger one watches the process and realizes, with small disappointment, that his future has already been worn by someone else. There can be tenderness in this too. You tie the laces firmly. You smooth the sock. You tap the toe and say it will do. The child believes you because children believe household declarations until the world contradicts them. And sometimes it does do. The shoe survives another day, another walk to school, another church service, another errand, another race down a lane that it was not authorized to run. By evening, the child returns with dust at the cuffs, a new scrape near the toe, and the triumphant look of someone who has lived boldly. You sigh, take the shoe again, and inspect the damage under lamplight. It is worse, of course. It is always worse, but not hopeless. Hard times teach you that not hopeless is a usable category. Tomorrow, with polish, cardboard, patience, and a mild threat about puddles, the shoe will report for duty again. You send your child into a schoolroom smelling of chalk, damp wool, pencil shavings, and coal heat, and you hope the teacher is kind enough to notice everything without saying too much. During the Depression, school could be a refuge, a burden, a source of pride, or the first place where a family's private hardship became visible in classroom honesty. Children arrived with patched sleeves, thin lunches, tired eyes, borrowed books, and lessons half finished because chores, illness, moving, or worry had interrupted them. Some teachers quietly found food, shoes, coats, or extra patience. Others expected discipline from children whose breakfasts had been theoretical. You watch your child leave with a slate, a book, or a bundle, and you understand that education is supposed to open doors, even when the family cannot afford proper hinges. The school building may be brick, wood, crowded, drafty, plain, or grand enough from the outside to suggest that society has its priorities arranged, though the children inside know better. A bell rings, boots scrape, desks creak, and the room fills with the smell of bodies warmed by coats that have seen too many winters. Maps hang on the wall. The alphabet waits with official patience. Your child takes a seat, and you are no longer there to protect the story of the household. That is the frightening thing about school. It receives children as citizens, but children arrive as evidence. A teacher can see hunger in the way a child's attention slips before noon, in the quick glance toward another lunch, in the tiredness that settles after recess, in the hands reddened by chores before class. In many depression communities, teachers themselves are underpaid, unpaid for stretches, or supporting relatives while trying to teach fractions to children who understand division because supper already explained it. Some teachers buy supplies with money they do not have. Some keep extra food. Some organize clothing drives. Some simply lower their voice and offer dignity, which is not the same as a meal but may help a child swallow one. School attendance can be complicated. A child may be needed at home to watch younger siblings while a mother seeks relief, takes in washing, or works. A farm child may miss days for planting, harvest, animals, or weather. A child in a migrant family may change schools repeatedly, arriving in one room with the handwriting of another state still in his copybook. A black child in the segregated South may face unequal schools, shorter terms, poorer buildings, fewer materials, and an education system that speaks of opportunity while locking several doors from the outside. Mexican-American, native, immigrant, and poor rural children may meet language barriers, prejudice, distance, and expectations shaped by labor needs rather than childhood dreams. The Depression does not simply make school difficult, it reveals which children were already expected to climb a hill with fewer books. You may know this, even if no one says it at the kitchen table. You may press a collar flat and hope neatness can protect your child from assumptions. In the classroom, lessons proceed anyway. Spelling words march across the board. Arithmetic problems. Ask how many apples remain after several are taken away, a question many children find unnecessarily personal. Geography offers rivers, mountains, capitals, and the implied promise that the country is large enough to contain somewhere better. History tells stories of presidents, pioneers, battles, inventions, and national progress, while outside the window a father may be walking home from another closed factory gate. Children learn to read, write, add, recite, behave, and raise their hands. They also learn the social rules of scarcity. Who has a new coat? Who has a lunch? Who smells faintly of wood smoke because the house heats that way? Who has moved again? Who is too proud to accept an extra sandwich and too hungry not to want it? You worry not only about whether your child learns the lesson, but whether the lesson learns too much about your child. And yet school can be a blessing. A warm room, a predictable schedule, a library shelf, a teacher who knows how to praise quietly, a friend, a game at recess, a chance to be more than the family's worries. Some communities develop school lunch efforts, milk distribution, or local programs because adults begin to understand that a child cannot learn well from an empty stomach, however much adults admire discipline. You may hear that the teacher has helped. You may be grateful and embarrassed in equal measure, because gratitude during the depression often arrives holding hands with humiliation. Your child comes home with chalk dust on a sleeve, a spelling paper, a story about another child, and perhaps a hunger made sharper by the school day. You ask what he learned. He says something vague about capitals or long division. He does not say that he watched another boy eat cake. He does not say that his stomach made noise during reading. Children keep secrets too, often to protect the adults who believe they are protecting them. You smooth the paper, praise the handwriting, and set it aside where a little achievement can be seen. The world may be failing many examinations, but your child has spelled enough words correctly to earn admiration before supper. Tomorrow you will send him patched, brushed, instructed, and carrying whatever lunch can be persuaded to exist. Education is hope with a timetable, and like most hope in hard times, it expects the children to arrive on time. You stand behind the house with a hoe, a seed packet, and the uneasy hope that the soil will be more cooperative than the bank. A garden in the Depression years could be practical, thrifty, and deeply personal, long before later wartime gardens gave backyard vegetables a brighter official name, because every bean plant promised a small argument against hunger. You plant potatoes, onions, beans, greens, tomatoes, or whatever the climate, land, and luck will allow, while children trail behind with muddy shoes and more enthusiasm than accuracy. The garden smells of damp earth, compost, grass, sun, and effort. It does not solve everything. It still needs rain, time, tools, and protection from pests, but it gives the household something rare and valuable, a place where work might become food instead of another disappointment. The first scrape of the hoe through soil makes a dry, gritty sound, and you listen to it with the attention usually reserved for news from a bank, a doctor, or a husband late coming home. Dirt has become part of the family budget. If you have a yard, a rented strip, a vacant lot, a farm patch, a community garden, or a relative willing to share ground, you use it. During the Great Depression, gardens helped many families stretch meals, preserve food, and maintain a little control in a world where wages, prices, weather, and banks seem to have formed a committee against ordinary people. The seed packet looks small in your hand, almost comically small, considering how much hope has been assigned to it. You press seeds into rows and understand that gardening is not just planting, it is planning disguised as kneeling. Beans can be eaten fresh, dried, canned, or traded. Potatoes fill stomachs with dependable seriousness. Greens offer vitamins, though the children may treat them as botanical punishment. Tomatoes brighten soup, sauce, and the shelf of jars that will later glow in the pantry like a private sunrise. Onions make cheap food smell, as if it has ambition. The children help, which means they drop seeds in clumps, step where they were told not to, ask whether radishes are ready 9 minutes after planting, and develop deep, emotional relationships with worms. You let them help anyway. A garden teaches patience, work, seasons, and the important truth that food does not begin in a store just because a store would prefer the credit. They learn to weed, water, carry, pick, shell peas, snap beans, and complain about heat. Complaining, like beans, is a hardy crop. You may assign each child a small task because usefulness keeps them busy and gives pride a place to stand. The youngest carries a tin cup of water with the seriousness of an irrigation bureau. The oldest turns soil, perhaps too roughly, perhaps quietly aware that this patch matters more than anyone is saying. Weather becomes personal. A good rain feels like assistance. Too much rain ruins seedlings and turns paths into mud. Drought makes every leaf look like a household accusation. Frost has the timing of a bill collector. In Dust Bowl regions, gardens may fail under heat, wind, drought, and dust, turning hope into another thing to sweep from the sill. Rural families may have more land but less cash, proving again that the Depression is less a single story than a collection of hardships arranged under one exhausted name. You save peelings for compost if you can. You keep seeds from plants that produce well. You trade with neighbours, extra beans for eggs, tomatoes for a little flour, a bunch of greens for help mending a fence. The garden becomes social as well as edible. A neighbour leaning over a fence can discuss rainfall, pests, children, relief, work, rumours, and the moral character of cabbage in one conversation. Everyone has advice. Plant deeper, plant earlier, add ashes, do not trust that beetle, watch the hens, keep the children from pulling carrots just to check if carrots are still happening underground. You accept some advice, ignore some, and later pretend you had always intended the result. There is comfort in the routine. Morning inspection, weeding after breakfast, watering in the evening, the smell of tomato leaves on your hands, the warm prickle of sun on the back of your neck, the satisfaction of carrying something into the kitchen that the household did not have to buy. Even a small harvest changes the mood of a meal. A few green beans can make potatoes look less lonely. A tomato sliced on a plate can brighten a table that has seen too much beige. Fresh greens can enter soup and behave as if they were invited by prosperity. Later, if there is enough, you will can, dry, pickle, store or cellar what you can, trying to trap summer before winter begins asking questions. By dusk, the children are dirt-streaked, the rows are uneven, and your hands ache in a way that feels almost honest. Work in a garden does not guarantee reward, which makes it much like everything else. But at least here the effort has leaves. You lean on the hoe and look over the little patch, already imagining meals from plants that are still only promises. The bank may not be listening, the factory may not be hiring, and the landlord may not be patient, but the beans, if treated kindly, may yet have the decency to grow. You stand in a hot kitchen with jars, lids, towels, steam, fruit, vegetables, and the grave suspicion that August is trying to drown you in humidity before it saves your family from January. Preserving food was not a charming rustic hobby for many families trying to survive hard times. It was insurance made of glass. Apples became sauce, tomatoes became jars of red patience, beans were put up with ceremony, peaches floated in syrup if sugar could be spared, and every sealed lid made a small, satisfying sound that felt like victory. Children were warned away from boiling water, then immediately returned to ask whether anything was ready. You line the jars on a shelf and admire them because they are beautiful, practical, and the closest thing your pantry has to a savings account. The kitchen windows are open, but the air outside has no intention of helping. It leans in warm and heavy, smelling of grass, dust, and ripe fruit, while the stove turns the room into a small domestic weather system. Your apron is damp at the waist. Your hair loosens at the temples. The children drift near the table, drawn by the possibility of peaches, then are sent away from the kettle with instructions that include safety, obedience, and the stern reminder that scalding water does not care how curious you are. In many homes during the Great Depression, canning and preserving were part of the old household economy, especially in rural areas and small towns, but hard times gave the work sharper edges. A jar of tomatoes was not only a jar of tomatoes, it was soup, sauce, stew, supper with dignity, and proof that summer had been made to sign a contract. You sort fruit by ripeness, cutting away bruised spots with the concentration of a surgeon operating on a patient purchased at a discount. Nothing good is wasted if it can still be trimmed, boiled, sweetened, salted, pickled, dried, or renamed. A soft apple becomes sauce. Windfall fruit becomes butter. Cucumbers become pickles with the assistance of vinegar and resolve. Green beans require care. because vegetables are useful but not always cooperative, and safe preserving methods matter even if the household would prefer not to think about invisible dangers. Some women use boiling water baths for fruits, tomatoes, jams, and pickles. Low-acid vegetables and meats need more careful handling, often with a pressure canner where one is available, because the pantry may be poor but it does not need to become medically ambitious. Advice may come from mothers, grandmothers, neighbours, county extension agents, booklets, farm papers, or the woman down the road who has put up enough beans to speak with the authority of a minor government. Everyone has rules. Boil the jars, check the lids, wipe the rims, leave the right headspace. Listen for the seal. Do not trust a jar that looks suspicious, smells suspicious, or has developed the personality of a science experiment. You follow the rules as best you can, because a spoiled jar is more than waste. It is a small betrayal sitting on the shelf. The children help by washing fruit, snapping beans, peeling apples, carrying towels, stealing scraps, and asking why everything takes so long. You tell them this is food for winter. They nod, though winter is an idea children understand mainly as cold feet and the sudden importance of coats. They may remember the taste later: syrupy peaches eaten slowly, tomatoes opening into red steam on a bitter evening, applesauce spooned beside potatoes, pickles sharp enough to make a plain meal feel alert. In the moment, they mostly remember being hot. You ladle carefully. The jars fill one by one, each shining with colour in the lamplight or afternoon sun. Your hands smell of vinegar, sugar, tomato leaves, peach skin, salt, and soap. The table is sticky. The floor has somehow acquired seeds. A fly believes it has been invited to supervise. You lift hot jars with a towel, set them apart, and wait for that little sound, the tiny pop or click of a lid drawing down. It is one of the most satisfying noises a poor kitchen can make, less grand than applause but much more useful. One jar seals, then another. A child cheers as if the family has won something at a fair. Perhaps it has. Not money, not security, not control over banks, wages, crop prices, factory gates, rent collectors, or weather. But something. A row of jars becomes a row of future meals, and future meals are a form of courage when tomorrow has not been especially polite. By evening, the heat has softened, the stove is cooling, and the shelves hold colour where worry used to stand. You are tired in your shoulders and wrists, but the pantry looks steadier than it did that morning. Summer has been washed, peeled, boiled, sealed, labelled in memory rather than ink, and ordered to report for duty when the snow comes. You sit by the window with a needle, a faded garment, and a button tin that sounds like tiny weather when you shake it. Clothing children during the Great Depression required skill, pride, thrift, and a willingness to believe that fabric had more lives than a farm cat. Dresses could be made from feed sacks or flour sacks, shirts cut down, trousers let out, hems lowered, cuffs turned, elbows patched, knees reinforced, and socks darned until the sock existed more as an argument than an object. You sew while the light lasts, feeling the cloth soften beneath your fingers. A child complains that the patch shows. You say it does not, which may be untrue, but dignity in hard times often begins with a mother lying kindly to a knee. The late afternoon light falls across your lap in a pale strip, and you keep the chair close to the window because lamp oil, electricity, or simple eye strength should not be wasted before supper. The needle goes in, pulls through, goes in again. It is quiet work, except for the children, who object to being measured, pinned, fitted, refitted, and reminded not to grow so carelessly. Clothing, like food, becomes a household department with no staff and many complaints. A coat must last one more winter. A shirt must serve school, chores, and Sunday if cleaned firmly enough. A dress must be lengthened without making it look as if the hem has been negotiating under pressure. In rural families, and some working households, cotton feed sacks and flour sacks can become valuable fabric, and by the Depression years, some manufacturers are already making sacks in prints because women have made it clear that if the sack is going to become clothing, curtains, towels, or quilts, it might as well arrive with a little cheer. Still, a printed sack does not sew itself. It must be washed, opened, planned, cut, and persuaded into the shape of a child who would rather be outside. You save every scrap. A piece too small for a sleeve may become a pocket. A piece too small for a pocket may patch a cuff. A piece too small for a cuff may enter the mysterious afterlife of the rag bag, where fabric waits for emergencies with more patience than some relatives. The button tin is its own civilization. Shirt buttons, coat buttons, odd buttons, pearl buttons, black buttons, a button from something nobody can identify but cannot throw away because the future may become specific. You tip them onto the table and search for a match while the youngest child stirs them with one finger, mesmerized by a wealth that cannot buy anything and yet seems too important to lose. Patches carry social risk. A patch on a knee says a child has played, fallen, worked or inherited trousers from someone with a more vigorous past. Too many patches may invite pity. Too neat a patch may invite suspicion that the mother has become proud of poverty, which is unfair, because the mother is merely trying to keep the child from appearing in public as a loose collection of threads. You choose thread close enough in colour, turn the cloth, catch the edges, and make the repair as smooth as you can. Children often hate patches because they reveal what adults call thrift, and other children call something less polite. You try to teach care without shame. Do not slide on the ground. Do not climb the fence in your good trousers. Do not wipe your hands on your dress. Do not use your sleeve as a napkin unless you wish to break your mother's spirit before noon. They nod. Sleeves remain in danger. Shoes wear, knees tear, cuffs fray, and buttons vanish with the mysterious independence of fugitives. Socks are worst. Socks develop holes at the heel, toe, and every place most inconvenient to repair. You darn them over a wooden egg, a light bulb if it is safe and available, or simply your fingers, weaving thread across the opening until the sock is less a sock than a woven argument in favour of perseverance. The child may complain that the darned place feels lumpy. You say it will soften. The sock says nothing, knowing it has already exceeded its expected career. Clothing also carries memory. A baby dress becomes a doll dress. A father's worn shirt becomes a child's shirt. A mother's old skirt becomes too small a garment if the fabric behaves. A flour sack becomes a Sunday dress with rick-rack trim if there is time, thread, and enough optimism to cut straight. A quilt grows from old dresses, shirts, flour bags, and the private history of a household too poor to waste its own past. You sew not only to cover bodies, but to keep children presentable in a world quick to mistake visible poverty for moral failure. That is the sting inside the thread. A clean patch is still a patch, but it says someone cared enough to make it clean. By the time dusk settles, your fingers ache, your eyes blur, and the garment in your lap looks respectable enough to face another day. The child holds it up, doubtful but willing. You tell him it looks fine. The patch, newly promoted to family diplomacy, sits on the knee and prepares to meet the world with a straight face. You heat water on the stove and prepare for bath night as though arranging a small municipal project. In a home without modern plumbing, reliable hot water, or enough fuel to waste comfort casually, washing children could require tubs, kettles, towels, soap slivers, coal, wood, patience, and a ranking system that nobody discussed but everyone felt. The youngest might go first, or the cleanest, or the one least likely to turn the water into a geological event. The room smells of steam, soap, damp towels, ash, and childhood resistance. A child objects to washing behind the ears with the moral outrage of a citizen whose rights have been violated. You continue anyway, because poverty may limit many things, but apparently not the need for neck inspection. The tub waits in the kitchen or near the stove, a round or oval kingdom of tin, enamel, or whatever the household owns that can hold water and survive protest. If your home has indoor plumbing, you are fortunate, though fortune may still include cold pipes, unreliable heat, crowded schedules, or water that must be used with respect. If you live in a rural house, a rented room, a cabin, a tenement, or a place where comfort arrived late and bills arrived promptly, bath night is a production involving fuel, lifting, pouring, testing, waiting, and the delicate art of not scalding anyone while also not freezing them into moral reform. Water is heavy before it becomes hygiene. It must be drawn from a pump, carried from a well, fetched from a tap, heated in kettles, poured into the tub, and guarded from children who wish to investigate it with sleeves. You test it with your wrist, then add cooler water, then warmer water, then wonder why cleanliness has chosen to require engineering. Soap is saved in slivers, pressed together, kept dry, and treated as a household resource rather than a fragrant luxury. Store-bought soap may be used carefully. Homemade soap may appear in some homes, plain and strong enough to remove dirt, dignity, and possibly a layer of childhood opinion. The children line up, each suddenly remembering an urgent reason to avoid washing. One is not dirty, according to himself. One washed recently, according to a memory nobody can verify. One insists that water in the ear is medically dangerous, which is impressive for a child who has spent the afternoon putting his entire body into a ditch. You begin with the smallest or the dirtiest, depending on household philosophy and the state of the water. The first child enters clear warmth. The next receives warmth with history in it. By the last child, the bath water has become less a transparent element than a written record of the family's outdoor activities. You may change it if there is enough fuel and time. You may not. Poverty teaches many forms of realism, and bath water is one of the more intimate ones. Hair washing is its own campaign. Girls with longer hair require combing, rinsing, towel drying, and negotiations over tangles that seem to have legal representation. Boys produce dirt in places that suggest they have been storing it for winter. Babies are slippery, delighted, or furious, and determined to make your apron part of the process. You wash feet, knees, hands, faces, necks, ears, and the grey line around a wrist where dirt has settled like a bracelet. The room fogs at the window. The stove gives off heat. Towels hang over chair backs. Someone laughs. Someone cries. Someone splashes after being told not to splash with such immediate timing that the instruction feels like a personal challenge. Cleanliness during the Depression is not only about health, though health matters deeply in a world where illness can become expensive before it becomes serious. It is also about respectability. A child sent to school clean, hair combed, nails trimmed if possible, clothes mended, and face scrubbed is being protected from judgment as much as germs. You may not be able to buy new shoes, but you can attack the dirt on the old ones. You may not be able to offer abundance, but you can send the child into the world smelling faintly of soap rather than defeat. That effort is invisible when successful, which is the usual reward for domestic labour. After the baths come the drying, dressing, hair combing, nail checking, and the capture of the child who thought nightclothes were optional. The clean ones are put into patched pyjamas, nightshirts, or whatever soft old garment has been demoted into sleepwear. Their cheeks glow, their hair lies down briefly, humbled by water. The tub must then be emptied, which is when you remember that water is still heavy after having performed its duty. You carry, tip, mop, wring, and hang towels, while the children, now clean, immediately begin rolling on the floor as if testing the permanence of your work. At last the kitchen cools. The soap is set aside, the stove settles, and the children are sent toward bed with the smell of damp hair and moral victory. You are tired enough to consider cleanliness a public achievement. The ears are clean, the necks have passed inspection. Tomorrow, naturally, the dirt will reopen negotiations. You listen to a cough in the dark and count the seconds between it, because a mother can become a clock when worry requires one. Medical care during the Depression could be uncertain, delayed, unaffordable, distant, or dependent on charity clinics, public health nurses, neighbours, home remedies, and the terrifying hope that the fever would break by morning. You may have aspirin, mustard plasters, castor oil, cod liver oil, Vicks, broth, flannel, and a grandmother's advice that arrives with confidence but no guarantee. Calling a doctor means money, travel, pride, and fear. Not calling means listening harder. The child turns under the blanket, hot-faced and small, and suddenly all the household arithmetic becomes useless, because worry refuses to balance. The room is dim except for a lamp turned low, or perhaps only moonlight at the curtain and the dull glow from the stove in the next room. A bowl of water sits on the table. A cloth lies folded beside it. The air smells of sweat, soap, camphor, damp wool, and the sour little heat of illness. You place your hand on the child's forehead as if your palm has become a medical instrument through sheer need. Too warm. Perhaps a little less warm than before. Perhaps you are inventing improvement, because improvement would be convenient. In hard times, parents often become reluctant experts in waiting. You wait for fever to fall, for breathing to ease, for a rash to fade, for a doctor to agree to come, for a clinic to open, for a neighbour with a car, for payday, for mourning. Illness in children is frightening in any decade, but during the Depression it arrives carrying extra questions. Can you afford the visit? Can you afford the medicine? Can you reach town? Will the doctor accept payment later, or eggs, or work, or nothing at all because he knows the neighbourhood has run out of money before it has run out of sick children? Many doctors did extend credit or treat poor families as best they could, and many nurses, public health workers, hospitals, charities, and local relief agencies tried to fill gaps, but help was uneven, shaped by place, race, income, distance, and prejudice. A child in a city might reach a clinic but wait in a crowded room. A child on a farm might be miles from care. A black child, a Mexican-American child, a native child, an immigrant child, or a child in a segregated community might meet barriers that had nothing to do with fever and everything to do with the old machinery of unfairness. You may not use those words at the bedside. You simply know whom the town helps quickly and whom it expects to endure. Home remedies sit nearby with the confidence of family tradition. Some are soothing, some are harmless, some are questionable, and all of them arrive with stories. A mustard plaster for the chest, warm broth, honey if there is any, a little vapor rub. Castor oil, feared by children with good reason and recommended by adults with suspicious enthusiasm. Cod liver oil, a spoonful of nutritional punishment delivered in the name of strength. You are careful. You remember what your mother did. You remember what the neighbour said. You remember the time a fever broke after midnight, and everyone spoke of it afterward, as if the household had negotiated successfully with the universe. But there are illnesses that do not care about courage. Pneumonia, influenza, measles, whooping cough, diphtheria, infections, accidents, bad teeth, malnutrition, and countless ordinary dangers can become serious quickly. Sulfur drugs begin changing some treatments in the later Depression years, but the broad world of antibiotics is not yet the everyday safety net later generations will come to expect. You do not know the future. 2000 Cytine Verstis. You only know the breathing in the bed. The child wakes and asks for water. You lift the cup, hold the small shoulders, feel the heat through the nightshirt. The child drinks and falls back, trusting you with a trust so complete it is almost unbearable. You sit beside the bed and listen. Outside a dog barks. A car passes far away. Somewhere a train sounds, carrying people with destinations and perhaps doctors with better instruments than a mother's hand. You think of the money hidden in the sugar bowl, the coins in the drawer, the bill already waiting from last month, the shoes that still must be repaired, the rent, the coal. Then the child coughs again, and every other concern steps back. This is the moral insult of illness. It makes the budget irrelevant while still sending bills. Near dawn, the fever may ease. The child's hair is damp at the temples. The breathing smooths. You fold the cloth, change the pillow, and allow yourself one careful breath. Or perhaps it does not ease, and you wrap the child, call the doctor, wake a neighbour, or start toward town with fear riding beside you like an unpaid passenger. Either way, the long night has taught you again that parents do not measure hardship only in money. They measure it in the distance between a cough and the next breath. When morning comes, the room looks ordinary, which feels almost rude. The bowl remains on the table, the lamp is out, the child sleeps. You have spent the night doing very little that anyone can see, except keeping watch as if attention itself were medicine. You hear the landlord step before he knocks, or imagine you do, which is nearly as bad. The house has thin walls, a cold corner, a leaking roof, and a rent date that returns with the regularity of a sermon. During the Great Depression, families who lost wages, farms, savings, or steady work often lived with the constant threat of eviction, foreclosure, doubling up with relatives, or moving to cheaper rooms that smelled of someone else's cabbage and defeat. You tidy before the visit because dignity insists on sweeping, even when money has declined to appear. The children are told to stay quiet. The table is cleared, the house looks respectable. It is a remarkable performance for a building that knows exactly how close it is to becoming memory. The knock, when it comes, is not necessarily cruel. That may be part of the trouble. The landlord may be hard, impatient, embarrassed, businesslike, sympathetic, or himself in debt to someone with a larger office and colder stationery. Hard times do not always produce villains. Sometimes they produce chains of people waiting for money that has failed to arrive at every link. Still, the person at the door is the one who can change your address, and that gives his shoes an authority you would prefer not to recognize. You wipe your hands on your apron and open the door with a face arranged into calm. Children watch from behind a chair, because children understand suspense long before they understand leases. The room smells of boiled coffee, floor soap, damp wool, ashes, and the faint sourness of worry that no open window can fully remove. You have hidden the worst of the disorder. The laundry is folded or disguised. The cracked cup is turned. The thin pantry is not visible from the doorway, thank goodness, because cupboards should not have to testify. Rent in the Depression is more than a monthly bill. It is a measure of whether the family's place in the world can remain nailed down. In cities, people may fall behind and face eviction from apartments, rented houses, furnished rooms, or tenements. In rural areas, farm families may face foreclosure, tenancy loss, crop liens, or debts tied to land that has carried their labour but not enough profit. Some families double up with relatives. Some take in lodgers. Some move repeatedly, each new room smaller, cheaper, colder, or farther from work. Some end up in shanty towns, camps, cars, barns, or makeshift shelter, while newspapers and officials search for language tidy enough to describe desperation without sitting too close to it. You may not be there yet. That is the phrase that haunts the house. Not yet. The rent collector stands in the doorway or sits at the table, and you explain what can be explained. Work has been short, wages delayed, a child sick, a promised job not begun, relief not approved, a brother sending money soon, a husband looking again tomorrow. Each sentence is true or true enough, but truth does not always fold itself neatly into rent. If your husband is home, he may speak. If he is away looking for work, you speak for the household, balancing honesty and pride like two full buckets. You do not want pity. You want time, which is more useful than pity and harder to obtain. Some landlords allow it, some cannot. Some will take partial payment. Some demand all. Some threaten, some sigh, some pretend not to notice that a child is listening. You may offer a few coins, a promise, a date, a piece of furniture held in imagination as collateral, though nobody says that aloud. The children have been told to be quiet, and therefore one of them immediately drops something in the next room with the theatrical timing of fate. You smile tightly. The landlord looks toward the sound. Domestic life has a poor instinct for legal drama. The house itself seems to hold its breath. Every object suddenly appears temporary. The table could be moved. The stove could go cold. The bed might be carried out. The curtains, sewn from fabric you could hardly spare, may fit no window in the next place. You realize again how much home is built from repetition, where shoes are kept, how light falls in the morning, which floorboard creaks, which hook holds the coat, where the children sleep safely enough to stop asking questions. An eviction notice, a foreclosure letter, or even a warning can loosen all of that before a single chair has moved, yet you keep your voice even. You ask for another week. You say money is expected. You do not mention the way you counted coins after midnight or the little envelope hidden behind plates. Pride is not foolish here. It is insulation. It keeps the children from feeling the full cold of adult fear. When the visitor leaves, with a warning or an extension or only the promise to return, the room exhales. The children ask if everything is all right. You say yes, because yes can mean many things, including not while you are standing here. You turn back to the table, the broom, the dishes, the ordinary jobs that continue even when a roof is uncertain. The house is still yours for tonight. The chairs know their places. The beds are not yet packed. The rent is not paid, but the floor has been swept, which is not a solution, only the form dignity takes when money is late. You open the door to family, or a boarder, or a cousin, who was meant to stay 2 nights and has now become part of the furniture. When money tightened, households often expanded in ways the floor plan had not approved. Grandparents, unmarried siblings, cousins, out-of-work men, widowed aunts, lodgers, and children all had to fit inside rooms designed by someone who believed privacy was abundant and walls were generous. Beds were shared, sofas became territories, curtains became doors, and kitchen schedules acquired the complexity of railway timetables. The house smells of extra coats, boiled coffee, damp shoes, frying onions, and people trying to be grateful without breathing too loudly. You tell the children to make room, because hard times have moved in and brought luggage. At first, the arrival may feel temporary, because temporary is a useful word when the hallway has already surrendered to suitcases. Your sister's trunk sits by the parlour wall. Your husband's brother sleeps on a cot that must be folded each morning before breakfast can legally occur. A widowed aunt occupies the spare bed with a handbag, a hat box, and a cough that comments on the weather. A boarder rents the back room, if you have one, and tries not to notice family quarrels while everyone tries not to notice that his rent is helping buy flour. During the Great Depression, doubling up was common for many households under strain. Families shared rent, food, heat, childcare, and worry because the alternative might be eviction, foreclosure, a boarding house, a relief station, or a humiliating return to relatives already living close to the edge. The arrangement could be loving. It could also be crowded enough to make affection require scheduling. You learn the new geography of the house. The parlour is no longer just a parlour. It is a sleeping room after 9 o'clock. The dining room table is a school desk, sewing table, bill office, and negotiations department. A chair beside the stove belongs to grandfather after supper because his knees ache, though the children keep forgetting and climbing into it as if seniority can be defeated by speed. The washstand has a line. The mirror has office hours. Towels vanish into damp heaps. Shoes multiply near the door with the moral confidence of rabbits. Privacy becomes something you remember from better months, like thick bacon or not knowing the price of coal by heart. Yet there are advantages. Another pair of hands can watch the baby, an aunt can mend, a cousin can split wood, look for work, take messages, or walk a child to school. A grandmother may turn scraps into soup with the authority of someone who has survived several eras and disapproved of most of them. A boarder's weekly payment may keep the rent collector patient. A lodger's appetite may frighten the pantry, but his coins can steady it. Everyone contributes if they can, though contribution is rarely simple. One person has money but no patience. Another has patience but no job. Someone is ill, someone is proud. Someone has opinions about how you season beans and shares them with the boldness of a person not currently buying the beans. The children adapt first, because children treat upheaval as unfair but interesting. They share beds head to foot, sleep under quilts made from old clothes, step over trunks, whisper after lights out, and learn which adults snore, which adults cry quietly, and which adult keeps candy in a drawer. They may love the company. They may resent losing space. They may repeat private remarks at breakfast with the innocent cruelty of official transcripts. You become the traffic officer of human feeling. You settle arguments over stove time, laundry day, missing spoons, loud radio programs, borrowed coats, and who left crumbs in a place where crumbs now carry political meaning. Meals become larger and thinner. A pot of soup accepts another potato, more water, a heel of bread, and a tone of optimism. Coffee stretches through the morning with the weary dignity of a public service. At night, the house settles in layers. Floorboards creak, springs complain, someone coughs, someone turns over, a child murmurs in sleep. Outside, the street is quiet, but inside your home a whole extended family is breathing under one roof, which is comforting until the roof leaks. Still, there is tenderness here. Hard times can make families sharp, but they can also make them close in ways nobody admits until much later. A cousin teaches your child to whistle. An aunt remembers a recipe. A grandfather tells stories of earlier troubles, mostly to imply that everyone is becoming soft, though he accepts a second helping when offered. You may feel crowded, watched, grateful, tired, and occasionally tempted to hide in the pantry, except the pantry now contains someone's suitcase. By morning, blankets are folded, cots disappear, chairs become chairs again, and the house resumes the appearance of ordinary life. It is not ordinary. It is a small republic of necessity. The spare bed is gone, the parlour has a curfew, and the sofa has entered public service without being consulted. You watch him leave in the morning with his coat brushed, his hat set right, and his face arranged into something the children can trust. Unemployment during the Great Depression was not just a number in a newspaper. It was a daily ritual of walking, asking, waiting, being turned away, reading signs, standing in lines and returning home with empty hands that still had to pat a child's head. You keep the house moving while he is gone, but everyone feels the absence of wages like a draft under the door. The children learn not to ask certain questions too quickly. You learn not to look at his face too long when he comes back. Supper is served gently, because hunger is difficult enough without making failure sit at the table. He leaves with a lunch if there is one, a clean collar if one can be managed, and shoes that have been polished more for courage than for leather. The street outside is still grey with morning. Other men may be walking too, each carrying a folded newspaper, a rumour, an address, a union hall possibility, a factory gate memory, or the name of a man who might know a man who might need someone by Wednesday. Work, in better times, can make a day hard. Work, when it disappears, makes the day shapeless and much longer. During the Depression, millions of men and women search for jobs in cities, towns, farms, shops, mines, mills, ports, rail yards, kitchens, offices, and streets already crowded with others doing the same. Not every father was unemployed, and many mothers also worked, took in laundry, cleaned, sewed, cooked, boarded lodgers, or found whatever paid work custom and necessity allowed. But the figure of the father looking for work became painfully familiar in many households, not because men alone carried the family, but because the loss of wages could rearrange everyone's breathing. You return to the kitchen after he leaves and begin the tasks that make waiting look useful. Dishes, beds, children dressed, water fetched, fire tended, lunch packed. The little one wants to know where Daddy went. You say he went to see about work, which sounds hopeful enough to send into a child's ear. The older child understands more. He has seen his father return quiet too many times. He may ask whether there will be money soon, then regret the question before you answer. Children become careful around unemployment. They learn which footsteps mean good news, which silences mean do not ask, and which adult smiles are being held up with string. Outside the house, your husband may stand in a line that moves slowly toward disappointment. He may enter a factory office where the clerk shakes his head before the sentence is finished. He may read a sign that says no men wanted, or hear that the job is taken, the shop is closed, the crew is full, the wage is low, or the employer wants younger men, stronger men, cheaper men, men without families, men who can travel, men who can wait, men who can somehow be hungry in a more convenient direction. If he is black, Mexican-American, immigrant, older, disabled, recently arrived, or simply known to the wrong people, the search may be narrowed before he begins. Relief work, public works jobs, private charity, and local employment efforts may help some families, but access is uneven and often tangled in politics, prejudice, paperwork, and luck. At home, you hear the clock. You count coal, bread, potatoes, coins, and excuses the children will accept. You may feel anger at him for no fair reason except that fear needs somewhere to stand. You may feel anger for him, which is cleaner but no easier to cook with. You may resent the way the house expects you to remain steady while the world removes the wages and keeps the bills. You do not say all this. You mend a cuff. You stir soup. You answer the door. You give the children chores and corrections because ordinary discipline helps the day pretend it has a spine. By afternoon, every sound outside becomes possible news. A car, a footstep, a gate. The children notice before you do, then pretend not to. When he comes home, his face tells part of the story before his words arrive. If there is work promised, the air changes. If there is none, the room receives him carefully. He may joke, he may wash his hands too long. He may sit with the newspaper, though the paper has already failed to employ him once that day. He may apologize without using the word. You set supper down without ceremony, because ceremony might be too heavy. The children talk softly, then louder if they sense permission. The baby reaches for him, mercifully uninterested in wage labour. He smiles then, perhaps tiredly, perhaps truly. That smile may be the bravest thing he has done all day. Later, after the children sleep, you may discuss money in low voices, or not discuss it because the sums are too thin to deserve sound. Tomorrow he will brush the coat again. Tomorrow you will send him out with hope folded as neatly as the collar. The country may call it unemployment. At your table, it is a chair waiting for a man to come home and pretend the day did not wound him. You hand a child a pail, a broom, a basket, a coal scuttle, or a younger sibling and call it helping because that is the word families use when necessity needs to sound cheerful. Children in depression households often carried real responsibilities: fetching water, gathering fuel, watching babies, weeding gardens, running errands, delivering papers, selling small goods, helping in fields, minding stoves, or doing laundry tasks that left their hands red and tired. This was not always cruelty. Often it was survival organized by height. Still, the line between teaching responsibility and borrowing childhood could become thin. You praise the child for being useful, and the child stands taller, proud and weary, while the broom in his hands looks almost as big as he is. Morning chores begin with the small negotiations of who is old enough, who is careful enough, and who has already proven that sending him with eggs is an act of optimism bordering on fiction. The youngest can carry clothespins. The middle child can sweep, if you define sweeping as moving dust from one jurisdiction to another. The oldest can fetch water, watch the baby, split kindling under supervision, stand in line at the grocer, or walk to a neighbour's house with a message folded in his pocket and instructions not to lose it, read it aloud, or trade it for marbles. In hard times, children often became part of the household machinery because there was no spare adult and no spare money to buy the convenience of innocence. Rural children might feed animals, gather eggs, milk cows, hoe rows, pick fruit, carry wood, or help with harvest. City children might deliver papers, run errands, sell small items, help in family shops, mind siblings in crowded rooms, or bring home coal fallen from carts or railroad tracks. Where that was done, and where danger and need had made an arrangement no mother liked. You do not necessarily think of this as child labour every time. You think of it as getting through Tuesday. The pail needs filling. The baby needs watching. The fire needs tending. The garden needs weeding. The floor needs sweeping because dirt is the only thing in the house reproducing without difficulty. You give instructions. Hold the handle with both hands. Keep away from the stove. Do not let the baby put buttons in his mouth. Do not talk to strangers unless Mrs. Rosen asks about the laundry. Do not dawdle. Do not run. Do not spill. Do not forget. It is a long list to place on a child whose socks are still losing arguments with gravity, and yet they often manage. They learn the weight of water and the sharp smell of coal. They learn which neighbour pays a penny for errands and which neighbour pays in advice, a currency children find difficult to spend. They learn that babies can be distracted with spoons, strings, songs, and lies about rabbits coming soon. They learn that a broom is less simple than it looks, and that adults have unreasonable standards about corners. There is pride in usefulness. A child praised for helping may glow for the rest of the morning. A boy carrying a basket may feel almost grown. A girl trusted with the baby may sit straighter, though her arms ache. An older child earning a few coins may bring them home with a look too serious for his face. You praise them because they deserve it. You also feel the pinch beneath the praise. A child should learn work, yes. A child should know responsibility, certainly. But there is a difference between setting the table and becoming part of the family's survival plan before long division has settled properly in the mind. The Depression blurred that difference for many families. Schoolwork was fitted around chores. Play came after errands. Rest waited behind the wash. Some children left school earlier than they might have in better times. Some learned to make themselves small when adults counted money, then useful when adults could not be everywhere at once. You may try to protect the smallest pleasures. A chore becomes a game if you can spare the energy. Who can gather the most kindling? Who can shell peas fastest? Who can keep the baby laughing longest? The children laugh, compete, complain, cheat slightly, and turn work into something brighter for a little while. But the work remains work. Little hands redden in cold water. Shoulders slump under baskets. A child watching younger siblings misses the older children playing outside. A paper route at dawn is still cold even if it teaches discipline. You notice. You may not be able to change it, but you notice. That noticing matters, even if history rarely writes it down. By evening, the children are dusty, cross, proud, and hungry. The baby has survived supervision. The water is fetched. The coal is carried. The floor has been swept into a state that could be called improved by a generous witness. You thank them and mean it. They receive the thanks with all the dignity of workers paid in praise and perhaps an extra spoon of supper. Later, when they sleep, their faces soften back into childhood, and you see how young they are. Necessity has borrowed them for the day. It will return tomorrow, probably before breakfast, carrying a pail. You dress the children as neatly as possible before going for help, because need may be private, but relief has a way of becoming public. The line outside a charity office, church pantry, municipal agency, or relief station carries flour, forms, shame, hope, resentment, gossip, and the quiet terror of being recognized by someone who used to borrow sugar from you. During the Depression, relief could be life-saving, humiliating, uneven, bureaucratic, and shaped by local prejudice, politics, race, nationality, and assumptions about who deserved help. You stand with a child pressed against your skirt, smelling wool coats, damp pavement, paper, and tired bodies. When your turn comes, you answer questions carefully. Hunger has brought you here, but pride insists on standing upright. The morning has already required decisions. Which child comes with you? Which child stays with a neighbour? Which coat hides the mended elbow best? Whether the oldest shoes can be polished into respectability? Whether to carry the basket openly or folded under your arm, as if the whole world has not already understood baskets by now. Relief in the Depression is not one thing. It may be a sack of flour from a private charity, groceries from a church, coal through a local agency, a rent voucher, surplus food, a public relief check, work relief for a husband, milk for children, clothing from a women's committee, or a visit from someone whose job is to decide whether your need is genuine enough to be recorded. The help matters. It can keep children fed, houses warm, and families together. But receiving help often means submitting the private life of the family to public inspection, and inspection has never been famous for gentleness. The line moves slowly. Shoes scrape pavement, a baby fusses, someone coughs, someone recognizes someone else, and both pretend the meeting is ordinary. You may see women you know from school, church, the market, the next street, or better days when nobody would have imagined standing here together while a clerk asks questions about income, rent, dependents, savings, and whether there were any relatives able to assist. Relatives are often mentioned by people who do not know that relatives can be poor in several directions at once. The child beside you leans against your skirt, warm and restless. You smooth his hair. He asks how long it will take. You say soon. Soon is a useful word, elastic enough to cover hunger, paperwork, and weather. Around you, voices stay low. Some people are angry, some are embarrassed. Some are silent with the exhaustion of having explained their trouble too many times to strangers behind desks. In many places, relief officials and private charities tried to separate the deserving from the undeserving, as if poverty were a classroom exercise and hunger could be graded for effort. Widows, children, the sick, and families with a respectable story might be treated differently from unemployed men, single people, migrants, racial minorities, immigrants, or anyone suspected of moral failure by someone with a stamp pad. Black families often received less, later, or under harsher terms. Mexican-American families and immigrants could face exclusion, suspicion, or pressure to leave. Local politics could shape who got help and who waited. Rural families might be isolated from agencies or reluctant to ask. Pride kept some away until cupboards made the decision. You may feel all of this without naming it. You simply stand in line, holding the child's hand, preparing your face. Inside, the room smells of damp coats, ink, old wood, paper, flour dust, and institutional coffee. A clerk asks questions. How many children? Is your husband employed? Any income? Any savings? Any boarders? Any relatives? Any garden? Any cow? Any rent due? Every question may be reasonable on paper and still feel like a hand opening drawers in your bedroom. You answer because the children need food. You keep your voice even because anger may cost more than you can spare. You may be given a slip, a parcel, a referral, a promise, or another appointment. You may be told to come back. Those words have a special cruelty when spoken to someone who has already spent the last of the morning getting there. If food is given, it is practical. Flour, beans, rice, cornmeal, canned goods, potatoes, milk, perhaps meat if fortune has arranged itself unusually well. You receive it with thanks. The thanks may be sincere. It may also be complicated by the knowledge that gratitude is now part of the price. Outside, you shift the parcel against your hip. The child asks what is inside. You say supper, which is the simplest and most merciful answer. On the walk home, the basket feels heavier than its contents. It carries relief, shame, anger, survival, and the strange blessing of not having to invent dinner entirely from air. By the time you reach the house, you have already decided how to stretch it. Flour for biscuits, beans for soup, potatoes for 2 meals if sliced thinly and praised at the table. You put the food away carefully, as if privacy can be restored by arranging cans on a shelf. The line is behind you now, but not gone. It has entered the pantry where even help must learn to behave like dignity. You carry a covered dish, a basket, or simply your tired self into a church basement that smells of coffee, waxed floors, hymnals, damp coats, and soup that has been stretched by women who understand stretching as both recipe and survival method. In many communities, churches, synagogues, mutual aid societies, women's clubs, ethnic associations, and neighborhood groups became quiet engines of survival. They organized meals, clothing drives, childcare help, rent collections, and the delicate business of helping people without making them feel stripped bare. Of course, charity came with witnesses, and witnesses came with opinions. You accept a bowl, lend a hand, fold donated clothes, and discover that kindness can be warm, practical, and still fully aware that your youngest has outgrown his coat. The basement is plain with low light, long tables, folding chairs, a stove or range working harder than its manufacturer probably recommended, and a row of women moving through the room with the steady efficiency of people who have turned scarcity into procedure. Someone pours coffee into thick cups. Someone slices bread. Someone opens a crate of donated clothing and begins sorting it by size, condition, and whether a child could be convinced to wear it without declaring social ruin. A kettle sends up steam. Soup breathes quietly on the stove, carrying the smell of onions, beans, bones if there are any, cabbage, potatoes, pepper, and the solemn optimism of hot water given a purpose. You may have come to help, or to receive help, or both, because in hard times the line between giver and receiver can shift from week to week with uncomfortable speed. Last month you brought jars. This month you need shoes. Next month you may watch another woman look away while accepting the coat your child has outgrown. Community aid during the Great Depression often worked this way. Local, personal, imperfect, intimate, and essential. Federal and municipal programs mattered, but before and alongside them, people organized in basements, halls, kitchens, lodge rooms, settlement houses, synagogues, churches, union spaces, neighborhood clubs and ethnic associations, passing along food, clothing, rent money, leads on work, and the moral support of not being hungry alone. The women in the room know more than they say. They know whose husband has been out of work longest. They know which family is too proud to ask. They know which child has been coming to school in a coat too thin for the weather. They know who waters soup beyond reason, and who has relatives sleeping in the parlour. This knowledge can be kind. It can also be sharp. A community is a blanket and a net and occasionally a curtain with several eyes behind it. You learn how to move within it carefully. You praise the soup. You do not ask whether the Smiths are behind on rent unless someone trustworthy has already turned the question into a plan. You fold clothes without holding them up too dramatically. You accept help without explaining every bruise on your pride. Children occupy the edges of the room, holding cups, swinging legs, whispering, guarding roles, or inspecting donated toys with the seriousness of appraisers. They may enjoy the warmth, the noise, the possibility of an extra slice of bread. They may also understand that this is not a party, even if someone has tried to make it feel less like a public admission. A good volunteer knows how to hand a child a coat as if it were found treasure, not evidence. A careless one can ruin the whole afternoon with a sentence meant to sound generous. That is why the best kindness in these rooms is often quiet. A parcel appears beside a chair. A rent collection is made without speeches. A job lead is passed in a folded note. A pair of shoes is set aside before anyone has to ask. In communities facing racism, exclusion, language barriers, or segregation, mutual aid can be even more vital, because official relief may be delayed, reduced, denied, or delivered with unnecessary humiliation. Black churches, immigrant associations, women's networks, unions, fraternal groups, and neighborhood societies often carry people through not because they have abundance, but because they understand the exact shape of the need. The soup may be thin, but the knowledge is thick. You help where you can. You ladle, sweep, sort, carry, write a name, watch a baby, pass bread, mend a sleeve, or sit beside someone who has run out of sentences. There is comfort in useful motion. It keeps the hands busy while the heart tries to maintain its manners. Later, when the meal slows and the chairs scrape back, people leave with bundles, leftovers, news, and the faint smell of basement coffee in their coats. You may walk home with a jar, a garment, a promise, or nothing visible at all except the strange steadiness that comes from having sat in a room where everyone knew the trouble and nobody required it to be translated. The world outside is still hard. The pantry may still be thin. The rent may still be waiting with its hat on. But for an hour, the basement has performed its small civic miracle. It has made poverty sit at a table and given it soup. You sit near the radio in the evening while the children sprawl on the rug, mend, draw, argue, or pretend to sleep so they can hear the grown-up parts. The radio became one of the great household companions of the Depression years, carrying music, comedy, news, serial dramas, advertisements, sermons, sports, and presidential reassurance into rooms where money was short and quiet could become too heavy. The set glows softly, the tubes warm, and the voices arrive with strange intimacy. A comedy program makes the children laugh. A news bulletin makes you pause over your sewing. A speech makes the room feel connected to something larger than its unpaid bills. The radio does not fill the pantry, but for a while, it fills the silence with company. The cabinet may be polished wood if you have managed to keep a good set, or a smaller table model bought second-hand, borrowed, repaired, or paid for in installments back when the future still seemed better at keeping appointments. It sits in the room like a visiting relative with excellent timing and no need for supper. You turn the knob carefully, listening through crackle, hiss, music and sudden voices that arrive from cities you may never see, sounding as if they have stepped through the wall with a hat and a microphone. In the 1930s, radio becomes a shared national hearth for many Americans. Not universal in every household, and not always affordable, but increasingly central to evening life. Some families own one, some listen at a neighbour's house. Some gather in stores, community spaces, or wherever a set can bring in the world. The children know which programs make the room brighter. They know the comedians, the songs, the adventure serials, the quiz shows, the bedtime routines, the jingles attached to products the family may not be able to buy but can apparently memorize without charge. Advertising enters the house with a cheerful voice and suggests soap, cereal, tonics, coffee, flour, tooth powder, and other comforts with the confidence of someone who has not looked inside your purse. You listen anyway, because even advertisements can make abundance sound nearby, which is either comforting or rude depending on the evening. There are music programs too. Dance bands, hymns, hillbilly music, classical pieces, crooners, gospel, local performers, and orchestras that make the parlour feel briefly dressed for an occasion. A child taps one foot. Another hums. The baby finally grows still, staring at the glowing dial as if it contains tiny people who have learned to behave better than the ones in the room. Comedy matters. In a hard year, laughter is not decoration. It is ventilation. A joke from the radio lets everyone laugh at the same time without discussing the rent, the shoes, the relief line, or the fact that supper relied on potatoes with unusual commitment. The laughter is gentle, then real, then gone, but the room feels different after it. News can change the air just as quickly. Reports of bank troubles, strikes, drought, elections, public works, foreign unrest, crop prices, or relief programs pass over the children's heads and land directly in the adult part of the room. You pause with a sock in your lap, needle half raised. Your husband, if he is there, may lean forward. A neighbour may stop speaking. Some names are repeated until they become part of the furniture. Washington, Roosevelt, Congress, Farm Aid, Work Relief, Prices, Recovery. Presidential fireside chats bring a particular kind of closeness, with Franklin Roosevelt's voice entering homes in measured, reassuring tones, explaining banks, recovery, drought, war worries later in the decade, and the idea that the nation is not simply a crowd of isolated kitchens failing separately. Whether every listener agrees or understands every policy is another matter. But the voice itself matters. It tells a frightened room that someone official is speaking plainly enough to be heard beside the stove. That is no small thing. Radio also changes how children imagine the world. The country becomes sound, cities become accents, ball games become cheers from far away. Fictional heroes arrive weekly, always finding trouble with better sponsors than most families have. The children learn to picture scenes from voices, hoofbeats, doors closing, train whistles, applause, and music swelling at exactly the right moment, which is more coordination than real life usually offers. You may enjoy it too, though you pretend to be only mending. The radio gives adults permission to rest without calling it idleness. Hands can sew, peel, polish, fold, or darn while ears travel. Some evenings the set fails, or the battery's tubes, aerial or reception misbehave, and the household reacts as if a guest has fainted. Someone taps the cabinet. Someone adjusts the wire. Someone declares that if everyone would stop moving, the signal might improve, a theory with limited scientific support but strong parental authority. At last the sound returns, and the children settle again. Later, after the programs end and bedtime claims them one by one, the radio sits dark and quiet. The room seems smaller without it. The bills are still there. The pantry is still considering its options. But the silence has been softened for an hour by music, jokes, news, and voices from beyond your street. The nation has not solved your supper, but it has at least come into the parlour and kept you company while you mended the socks. You watch the children invent a kingdom from a tin can, a stick, a length of string, a marble, a cardboard box, and a patch of dirt that has been promoted to neighbourhood headquarters. Depression childhood was not only hunger and worry. It was also games in alleys, fields, schoolyards, vacant lots, porches, sidewalks, and farm lanes, where children made toys out of whatever adults had failed to throw away with sufficient authority. They played jacks, marbles, tag, hopscotch, hide-and-seek, stickball, dolls made from scraps, wagons repaired beyond dignity, and imaginary adventures unconcerned with gross domestic product. You are grateful for their laughter, then suspicious of the silence that follows it. Silence in children, like credit, should always be investigated. The afternoon light slants across the yard or the alley or the road outside the house, and the children scatter into play with the seriousness of people taking possession of a continent. One child drags a box to the corner and declares it a store, a fort, a train, a ship, or a house whose roof is more theoretical than yours, which feels unnecessary but imaginative. Another has a stick that is first a sword, then a fishing pole, then a horse, then a pointer in a schoolroom where the baby is failing geography. A tin can tied to string becomes a telephone, a wagon attachment, a cooking pot for mud, or a dangerous object that adults will later wish had been recycled into silence. In hard times, children do what children have always done. They convert scarcity into territory. They do not call it resilience. They call it playing until someone makes them come inside. Manufactured toys exist, of course, and some families still buy dolls, trains, balls, board games, books, roller skates, or little luxuries when birthdays, relatives, or better wages permit. But many children rely on homemade play, shared toys, borrowed equipment, street games, schoolyard inventions, and the astonishing ability of a group of small people to make a rule system from dust. Marbles click in pockets and gutters. Chalk marks hopscotch squares on sidewalks. Jacks scatter on porches. A rubber ball becomes the centre of several disputes and a surprising amount of diplomacy. Stickball turns an alley into a stadium, provided no window suffers too directly from civic enthusiasm. On farms, children climb fences, chase chickens, build forts in hay, wade creeks, make dolls from clothespins or corn husks, and learn that work animals are not toys no matter how friendly they look from behind. In cities, stoops become meeting places, fire escapes become forbidden temptations, and vacant lots become kingdoms until an adult remembers tetanus. You listen from the kitchen or porch, sorting laundry, snapping beans, or pretending not to enjoy their nonsense. Their voices rise and fall. They accuse each other of cheating. They invent rules that favour the inventor. They defend imaginary property lines with the firmness of landlords and the legal training of squirrels. One child cries, recovers, and returns to the game after a settlement nobody could explain in court. This is the other side of depression parenting. You may be constantly worried about food, rent, shoes, illness, and work, but the children still want to laugh. They still want to run. They still want a birthday, a secret club, a pet, a dare, a fort, a hiding place, and a reason to shout that somebody is it. Their play can be noisy enough to irritate the nerves you have been trying to preserve all day. It can also be the sound that proves the house has not been defeated. You may feel guilty when you see them make do with so little. Then you watch them crown a bent spoon king of the Mud Kingdom and realize pity has not been invited. Children can love poor toys deeply because imagination does not check the price tag before entering. Still, poverty enters play too. A child with no proper ball may borrow. A child with no coat may stay near the stove. A girl expected to mind younger siblings may play school instead of joining tag. A boy sent to sell papers may envy children who can spend the afternoon on marbles. Race, region, neighborhood safety, farm demands, illness, disability, and family labor all shape who plays, where, and for how long. The depression does not erase childhood, but it does keep calling children back from it. You hear that call yourself when you step outside and tell them it is time to fetch water, mind the baby, bring in wood, wash hands, stop throwing dirt, leave the neighbor's fence alone, and please explain why the youngest is wearing a saucepan. They explain. The explanation is imaginative, legally weak, and delivered with confidence. Near evening, the kingdom collapses into ordinary objects again. The can is dented, the string is knotted, the cardboard box has lost a wall. The marble is missing, then found in a shoe. Everyone is hungry, filthy, and deeply offended by the suggestion of washing. You gather them in, half stern and half grateful, because for a few hours they were not children of unemployment, relief, dust, or rent. They were pirates, shopkeepers, explorers, mothers, cowboys, teachers, bandits, queens, and engineers of a box that should never have been asked to support that many ambitions. The toys go back to being scraps, but only after the children have made them feel important. You prepare a birthday with flour, hope, perhaps one egg, a little sugar if the household has been very disciplined, and the theatrical skill of a stage manager facing a curtain with several holes in it. Birthdays during hard times still mattered, maybe more because the world had become so ungenerous. A cake might be small, plain, eggless, frosted thinly, or replaced by a special pudding, a favourite supper, a handmade toy, a repaired doll, a ribbon, a book from a church sale, or a promise disguised as celebration. The children gather around the table with eyes shining in the lamplight. You sing, smile, and hope the joy is louder than the missing things. Somehow, for a few minutes, it is. The morning begins with secrecy, which is difficult in a crowded house where even the walls appear to know the grocery situation. You measure flour carefully, shake the sugar tin, and consider whether the recipe can survive without what it once considered essential. Depression kitchens are full of revised recipes. Eggless cakes, milkless cakes, butterless cakes, spice cakes, applesauce cakes, boiled raisin cakes, cocoa if available, molasses if present, and any combination that lets a mother produce something sweet while the pantry looks on with skepticism. You may have a neighbour's recipe written on a card, a newspaper clipping, a church booklet, or your own memory of how your mother did it before prices began behaving like weather. A little cinnamon can do a great deal for morale. So can a candle, even if it has already served another birthday and is now shorter, leaning, and clearly tired of ceremony. You clean the table. You choose the best plate. You turn the chipped side of the cup away from the birthday child, because presentation is free if no one looks too closely. The other children are instructed not to mention size, cost, missing frosting, or the fact that one gift was visible last week in a different form. Gifts require imagination. A doll may receive a new dress from a scrap of flour sack. A wooden toy may be sanded and painted if paint can be spared. A book from a second-hand stall or church sale may become treasure, especially if it contains pictures. A handkerchief embroidered with a crooked initial may be presented with great seriousness. A little boy may receive a repaired wagon wheel, a homemade kite, a pocket knife if he is older and the household has accepted anxiety as part of growth, or a marble that has been polished until it looks almost official. A girl may receive hair ribbons, a paper doll, a small apron, a mended doll, or something practical disguised carefully as special. Practical gifts are dangerous. Socks may be needed, but asking a child to greet socks as joy requires theatrical cooperation from all adults present. You may wrap the gift in newspaper turned inward so the headlines cannot attend, tie it with saved string, and place it near the cake as if the whole arrangement has been planned by abundance rather than courage. The birthday child knows more than you think. Children understand the size of things. They know when adults are stretching. They know when a cake has been praised into grandeur. But they also want to believe the performance, and so they often help sustain it. They smile too brightly, or become suddenly shy, or pretend not to notice that the present is small. This is tenderness on both sides. The parent pretending there is enough, the child pretending not to see the pretending. If relatives or boarders are in the house, the celebration grows noisier and more complicated. Someone sings off key. Someone tells a story about the day the child was born, improving the weather and shortening the labour according to personal taste. Someone says how tall the child has grown, which is both affectionate and financially ominous. If your husband is home, he may lift the birthday child into his lap, making the room softer. If he is away looking for work, travelling or absent, you work harder to fill the space, which is unfair but common enough that women become skilled at expanding themselves for occasions. The cake is cut thinly. The birthday child receives the best piece, or at least the piece that looks best from above. The baby is given a crumb and behaves as if granted ownership of the table. Everyone sings. For a brief moment, the depression is not gone, but it is asked to wait outside the door like a rude caller. The room holds voices, lamplight, crumbs, sticky fingers, and the smell of sugar warmed into memory. Later, you scrape the plate, save the candle stub, fold the wrapping, and put away the string. Nothing is wasted, not even celebration. The child goes to bed with the gift nearby, perhaps under the pillow, perhaps on the chair, perhaps held in one hand until sleep loosens the fingers. You stand in the doorway and let yourself feel the ache and victory of it. The cake was small, the present was modest, the budget survived only because it was not consulted too closely. But the child had a birthday, and for a household in hard times that is not a small thing. It is proof that joy, when necessary, can be cut into thin slices and still go around. You wake before dawn to arrange stockings, parcels, oranges, nuts, candy if possible, handmade gifts, mended toys, and whatever small wonders the household could manage without frightening the budget. Christmas during the Great Depression could sharpen every contrast. Generosity and scarcity, tradition and worry, children's expectation and parental arithmetic. Some families still kept rich traditions. Others reduced, improvised, borrowed, traded, made, repaired, or quietly apologized to the ceiling after everyone slept. A doll might receive a new dress instead of a new doll. A train might be repaired. A child might receive mittens and be expected to admire practicality with spiritual maturity. You place the gifts carefully, because arrangement costs nothing, and in the right light even modest things can look like abundance. The house is cold in that particular early morning way, when the stove has not yet remembered its duty and the floorboards seem personally interested in your bare feet. You move quietly, carrying bundles wrapped in newspaper, brown paper, cloth, or whatever could be saved without looking too saved. The children are still asleep, or pretending to be, because children on Christmas morning develop a hearing range that would impress a forest animal. You lay out stockings near the chair, the mantel, the bedpost, or wherever family custom has decided wonder may be hung. If there is an orange, it sits round and bright at the toe like imported sunlight. In many Depression households, an orange, a few nuts, a stick of candy, or a small toy can carry real magic, especially for children accustomed to practical meals and repaired possessions. The modern eye might call it modest. A child who has waited all year may call it treasure and mean it. You check the gifts again. One is a carved toy, made by an uncle with more patience than money. One is a doll whose face has been washed and whose new dress is stitched from scraps. One is a book with someone else's name inside, carefully crossed out or ignored because stories can survive previous ownership. One is a pair of mittens, necessary and warm, and you hope the child will receive them as love, rather than evidence that the household has confused Christmas with weather management. During the Depression, holidays did not disappear. People held to them precisely because daily life had become so narrow. Churches, schools, relief agencies, unions, newspapers, clubs, neighbours and relatives often organised gift drives, food baskets, pageants, parties or meals for children. Department store windows still glowed in cities, though many families could only look. Radio programs carried songs and stories into homes where decorations were homemade and supper depended on luck. Some families had trees, trimmed with paper chains, popcorn, cranberries, saved tinsel, candles in more old-fashioned homes, or homemade ornaments guarded with great authority. Others had a branch, a few greens, a ribbon, or no tree at all. Because evergreens do not solve rent and parents are forced to make decisions trees have never had to face. You do what you can. That phrase may sound small, but whole civilizations of motherhood have been built inside it. The children wake in a rush of blankets, whispers, and feet crossing cold floors. They enter the room with hair wild and faces open in a way that almost hurts to see. For a moment, they do not calculate, they simply receive. The orange is admired, the candy is counted. The repaired toy is recognized and loved again, perhaps with a slight suspicion that it has been improved by adult conspiracy. The mittens are tried on with a seriousness that suggests they may become acceptable after all. If one child has more than another, you manage the distribution with diplomatic skill. If a younger child wants the older child's gift, you intervene before Christmas becomes a land dispute. Breakfast may be special if possible. Pancakes, biscuits, fried potatoes, eggs, ham, sausage, coffee, cocoa, or simply something warm with enough sweetness to announce the day. Dinner later may include chicken, roast, rabbit, beans, potatoes, pie, pudding, or a community meal, depending on the household, region, money, and who has invited whom, out of kindness or pity. You may set the table with the best dishes, even if one is cracked. You may light a lamp, smooth a cloth, and insist that everyone wash properly because celebration deserves clean hands, even when the soap is tired. There may be sadness too. A father away looking for work. A relative who has moved in after losing a home. A letter instead of a visitor. A child old enough to understand why the pile is small, but the day has its own mercy. Songs help, stories help. Neighbours stopping by help. Children playing with the box as much as the gift help more than adults prefer to admit. By afternoon, paper is folded for reuse, string is saved, crumbs are guarded, and the orange peels release a clean, bright smell that makes the room feel richer than it is. At night, the children sleep near their gifts, and the house settles into a quiet that feels earned. You count what remains: a few nuts, a candle stub, cold potatoes, paper worth saving, and the relief of having carried Christmas across a hard year without dropping it. The world outside is still poor, but for one day, wonder has accepted homemade arrangements. You wipe the table and watch a fine, brown film return as if the weather has developed social ambitions. For families in the Dust Bowl regions, raising children during the Depression could mean fighting not only poverty but the land itself, as drought, wind, failed crops, debt, and dust storms entered lungs, beds, dishes, schools, and every folded piece of clothing. The sky could darken at noon. Wet cloths might be placed over windows. Children might wear makeshift protection over their faces. Babies coughed. Animals suffered. Fields vanished into air. You sweep again, because sweeping is what a person does when helplessness needs a broom. The dust does not care. It has already accepted your invitation without receiving one. The morning begins with a line of grit along the windowsill, a thin coating on the plates, and the unpleasant discovery that the bedclothes, though indoors all night, have apparently been sleeping outside. Dust is on the cups. Dust is in the cracks of the table. Dust lies on the baby's blanket with the quiet confidence of something that has no manners and unlimited relatives. If you live in the hardest hit parts of the southern plains, in places where drought, overploughing, high winds, falling crop prices, and debt have turned whole landscapes fragile, dust is not merely dirt. It is weather, crop failure, bank trouble, health worry, and housework combined into one brown visitor. Not every Depression family faces this. Many live in cities, farms, towns, forests, coasts, mountains, or regions with other troubles, proving again that the decade has a wide menu of difficulties. But for Dust Bowl families, the air itself becomes part of parenting. You watch the sky. A clear morning may shift. A brown line may rise at the horizon. The light changes first, becoming strange and coppery, then dim. Chickens go still. Cows turn away. Children are called inside. A dust storm can roll in like an enormous wall, swallowing roads, fences, fields, machinery, and the distance between the house and the barn. The wind finds every gap, every crack, every loose board, every place where cloth has been pressed and hope has been assigned. You hang wet sheets or cloths over windows and doors. You stuff rags along sills. You cover the baby's face lightly and carefully. You tell the children to keep cloth over their mouths if they must move. You speak calmly, because panic is not useful and because children measure storms partly by the sound of their mother's voice. Inside, the room darkens at midday. The lamp is lit. Dust pushes in anyway, under doors, through walls, around frames, down chimneys, into food, hair, ears, noses, and every bowl that was foolish enough to be clean. Breathing becomes work. Coughing becomes common. Some people speak of dust pneumonia, a term used for the serious respiratory illness linked to breathing dust. Children and older people can suffer badly. You know the sound of a cough that has been stirred by the weather. You know the way a baby's chest rises too quickly. You know the fear of trying to keep lungs clean in a house that cannot keep plates clean. Farming, if your family farms, becomes heartbreak in rows. Wheat fails, topsoil lifts, fences drift over, machinery sits half-buried. Livestock need feed and water that may not be available. A field that once promised bread now leaves grit in your teeth. Men and women argue over staying, leaving, borrowing, selling, enduring, or loading the car for a road that may not lead to anything kinder. Children absorb it all. They learn to read the horizon. They learn that a storm can come indoors. They learn not to leave a cup uncovered. They learn that a school day may end early because the sky has lost interest in visibility. They may play in dust when it is only ordinary dirt, because children are loyal to play even under poor management, but they also learn the tired ritual of wiping, shaking, coughing, and sweeping. You sweep the floor after a storm and pile dust by the door, then watch more settle before the broom is put away. This is where the absurdity begins to feel almost personal. The dust seems not only present but determined to participate. It attends supper. It lies down in beds. It enters drawers. It softens the outlines of chairs. It gives the kitchen a new surface every hour. You wash dishes before using them, then again after using them, and perhaps once more because the air has made a comment. There is no final victory, only intervals. And yet, even here, families continue. You cook with covered pots. You shake blankets outside when outside is not worse. You tell stories by lamplight while the day is dark at noon. You write letters describing conditions that relatives elsewhere may not fully believe. You comfort children who are frightened by the sound of wind pressing against the house like a crowd. After the storm passes, light returns slowly, dusty and weak. The world outside looks rearranged. The table must be wiped again. The children must be washed. The bedding must be beaten. Supper still has to happen, because hardship may be dramatic, but it has never excused anyone from potatoes. You stand with the broom in hand, looking at the brown film already forming on the sill. The dust has lost the field, found your house, and settled in as if it pays rent. You pack what can fit into a car, truck, wagon, or borrowed vehicle, and leave behind what cannot, which is how a family learns the exact weight of memory. Not every Depression family migrated, and not every migrant story was the same. But for many driven by drought, farm loss, unemployment, foreclosure, or hunger, the road became a moving household. Children slept sitting up, ate beside roads, asked when they would arrive, and watched their parents scan fields, camps, signs, towns, and other travellers with tired hope. California, a city, a relative's address, a labour camp, or simply somewhere else became a destination large enough to carry disappointment. You tell the children it is an adventure. The luggage knows better, but it keeps quiet. The packing begins with arguments no one wants to have aloud. Which quilts, which pans, which photographs, which tools, which chair can be sold, which trunk can be tied down, which toy can be brought if it fits between the bedding and the spare tyre, and which little household object must be left behind to become part of the silence in an empty room. A mother learns that a house is not one thing, but hundreds of small claims on the heart. The chipped bowl, the school papers, the jar of buttons, the baby dress saved for no practical reason except that memory is rarely practical. You fold what you can. You wrap what might break. You leave what cannot be carried, and the children watch adults decide the fate of objects with a seriousness usually reserved for weather and doctors. The car, if you have one, is loaded beyond dignity. Mattresses, pots, blankets, tools, buckets, clothes, a box of food, maybe a chicken crate, perhaps a washboard, perhaps a sewing basket, because wherever the family goes, trousers will continue to misunderstand knees. If there is no car, there may be a truck, wagon, train ticket, bus fare, or the road on foot, depending on money, place, race, and luck. Migration during the Depression was never a single parade westward. Some families moved from farm to town, town to city, one county to another, one relative's house to the next, or from the Dust Bowl and Southern Plains toward California and other places that sounded, from far away, as if work might be waiting with clean hands. Often work was not waiting, or it was waiting with low wages, crowded camps, suspicious locals, and fields already full of other hungry families who had read the same hope in the same direction. The children count miles because miles are easier than days. A mile has a number, a day has heat, dust, questions, and the problem of supper. They ask where they will sleep, you say you will see. They ask if there will be school, you say soon. They ask if the dog could have come. You look ahead at the road and say nothing for a moment, because some answers are too heavy to place in a moving car. Roadside meals become another kind of kitchen. Bread, beans, cold potatoes, canned goods, fruit bought cheaply or picked if allowed, water from pumps or stations, coffee boiled over a little fire if there is time and fuel. Dust gets into food, hair, socks and tempers. The baby cries. The older child tries to be useful. Someone becomes carsick with poor timing. You learn the locations of creeks, filling stations, camps, shade trees, and places where people look at you kindly or do not. Migrant families often face suspicion, especially when they arrived poor, dusty, and desperate in communities already under strain. Words like outsider and Okie could be used sharply, even for people who were not from Oklahoma, because hardship has always been talented at inventing labels before offering help. Government camps and local aid existed in some places, but not everywhere, and not enough for everyone. Families might sleep in tents, cars, shacks, orchards, ditches, or crowded camps where privacy was as scarce as cash. Still, the children play if there is space. They draw in dirt, chase each other between cars, trade stories with children from other families, and learn that a household can have wheels, canvas, and no proper address. At night, you count them before sleeping. 1, 2, 3, all there, all breathing, all carrying the day in dust on their faces. The stars above the camp or roadside seem too wide, almost rude in their abundance, while the family owns so little space below them. You may feel grief for the house left behind, fear of the place ahead, shame at needing to leave, and a stubborn thread of hope, because parents cannot afford to spend everything on despair. Morning comes. The bedding is rolled. The children are loaded back into the vehicle with crumbs, questions, and one small treasure rescued from the floorboards. The road continues, patient and indifferent. You call it going west, or going to work, or going to family, or starting over. The children call it the trip. The car knows it is a home that has not yet found where to stop. You discover that hardship has many rooms, and not all of them have the same door. The Great Depression touched millions, but it did not fall evenly. Black families often faced entrenched discrimination in jobs, schools, relief, housing, wages, and public treatment. Mexican-American families and immigrants could face suspicion, exclusion, repatriation campaigns, language barriers, and precarious work. Native communities, tenant farmers, sharecroppers, domestic workers, industrial families, and rural children each met the crisis through different histories and unequal systems. You may be raising children in a world that tells them thrift is virtue, while denying them fair chances to earn, learn, or belong. The pantry may be thin for many families, but some children also grow up learning that society can ration dignity. You see this most clearly in the ordinary places where childhood is supposed to be simple. At school, one child receives a worn book, another receives no proper book at all, and a third is told by the building itself that his education has been assigned a smaller room, a shorter term, a weaker roof, or a longer walk. In a store, one mother is trusted for credit while another is watched. In a relief office, one family's hardship is treated as unfortunate, while another's is treated as suspicious before anyone has opened the file. The Depression makes hunger more common. but it does not make everyone equally visible, equally believed, or equally helped. If you are a black parent in a segregated town, your child may know early which door to use, which school receives less, which jobs are likely closed, and which public kindness has conditions folded inside it. Black workers are often among the first fired and the last hired, and relief can be distributed through local systems already shaped by racism. You may teach your children thrift, manners, patience, and pride, while also teaching them the careful map of danger and insult that no parent should have to hand down with breakfast. If you are Mexican American, or part of an immigrant family, the hard years may bring not only unemployment and hunger, but suspicion from officials, neighbours, employers, and relief systems. Repatriation campaigns in the 1930s pressure or remove many people of Mexican descent, including some who are American citizens, from communities where families have built lives, paid rent, gone to school, and planted memories. A child may learn that belonging can be questioned by a clerk, a neighbour, a headline, or a uniformed man with papers. If you are raising children in a native community, the Depression enters lives already shaped by dispossession, federal policy, boarding school histories, poverty, and unequal access to resources. If you are a tenant farmer or sharecropper, black or white, your children may understand debt before they understand maps, because the crop, the landlord, the store account, and the weather all seem to have claims on the family. If you are a domestic worker, a washerwoman, a day labourer, a factory worker, a miner's wife, a railroad family, a cannery worker, or a household moving between seasonal jobs, your children learn the particular shape of insecurity attached to that work. They know when a mill whistle matters, they know when a harvest fails, they know when the employer's mood has entered supper. None of this means every child in these communities experiences only sorrow. Children still laugh, play, tease, learn songs, help grandmothers, carry babies, make forts, chase balls, and build whole afternoons out of nothing but nerve and sunlight. Families create joy inside unequal systems with astonishing craft. Churches, mutual aid societies, unions, lodges, women's groups, neighbourhood networks, and extended families often offer support where official systems fail or humiliate. But the unfairness remains, not as a lecture, but as a daily arrangement of doors, desks, wages, coats, clinics, sidewalks, and tones of voice. You may feel it when your child asks why another school has better books. You may feel it when relief is delayed. You may feel it when a job is given away before your husband, your wife, your older son, or you yourself are allowed to be considered. You may feel it when a child repeats a cruel word heard in the street and watches your face change. Then comes the careful work of parenting under unfairness. You teach them not to swallow shame that belongs to someone else. You teach them to stand upright when the world has mistaken poverty for permission to look down. You teach caution without trying to kill joy, pride without pretending danger is imaginary, hope without lying too badly about the road ahead. This is delicate labour, and no government form records it properly. At the table, the meal may look like many other Depression meals. Beans, bread, potatoes, greens, maybe a little meat, maybe not, but the child eating it may be carrying burdens another child is spared. The decade is hard for millions. It is harder still when hardship arrives with rules about who deserves help, who belongs, and who must wait. You wipe the table, pass the bread, and look at the children. You cannot give them a fair world before bedtime. You can only give them supper, warning, tenderness, and the stubborn knowledge that their dignity was never supposed to be rationed in the first place. You notice the oldest child standing in the doorway, no longer quite small, not yet grown, listening to adult worries with the careful face of someone being recruited by necessity. During the Depression, older children might leave school early, take odd jobs, sell newspapers, shine shoes, help on farms, care for siblings, join youth or work programs when old enough, or travel in search of wages before childhood had fully finished with them. Parents could be proud and heartbroken at once. A boy's first pay might help buy coal. A girl's household labour might make the whole family function. You thank them for helping, and they glow under the praise, while you privately understand that gratitude is not the same as innocence preserved. Yesterday, or so it feels, the oldest child was asking whether clouds could hear. Now he is standing near the stove asking how much coal costs. Yesterday she was dressing a doll. Now she is dressing the baby, tying a younger child's shoes, stirring oatmeal, and telling everyone to stop fighting because mother has a headache. Hard times do not always announce when childhood has been promoted. They simply hand it a basket. The older child begins to notice the ledger of the house: rent, groceries, relief, shoes, medicine, lamp oil, school supplies, and the mysterious adult habit of lowering voices whenever money enters the room. You try not to let them hear too much, but walls are thin, and older children have ears sharpened by love. They know when a parent is pretending not to worry. They know when supper is thin. They know when a visitor means business. In many depression families, older children took on work because the household needed every possible contribution. A boy might sell newspapers on a corner, shine shoes, carry groceries, deliver messages, gather coal, help on farms, pick crops, or look for day labour. A girl might take in sewing, mind children, clean, cook, wash, help in a family business, work in fields, or become the small second mother of a crowded house. These patterns are shaped by gender expectations, race, class, region, and opportunity, but the pressure is familiar. Someone must watch the younger ones. Someone must stand in line. Someone must carry water. Someone must keep the baby from entering the stove's political sphere. School may begin to loosen. A child misses a day, then another. A teacher sends a note. You mean to answer it, but the baby has fever. Your husband is away looking for work. The laundry must be finished, and the older child is the only person in the house tall and sensible enough to manage certain disasters. Some children stay in school and still work before or after. Some leave earlier than anyone would have chosen in a kinder year. Later in the decade, youth programs may offer work, training, or small wages for some older boys and girls, but access varies, and childhood does not wait politely while agencies decide who qualifies. The first coins brought home can change the room. The child places them on the table, trying not to look proud and failing beautifully. You praise the effort. Perhaps you add the coins to the coal money, or buy flour, or save them toward shoes. The child sees the money become food, heat, or rent, and understands usefulness in a way that both strengthens and saddens him. There is dignity in contribution, but there is also danger in being needed too much. You may want to tell the child to keep the money for himself. You may not be able to afford that kind of nobility. The older child may grow serious. He may correct the little ones too sharply. She may stop asking for things. He may pretend not to care about a school picnic. She may say she does not need a new ribbon. These are not always signs of maturity. Sometimes they are signs of a child learning to reduce the size of her wants so the family can breathe. You notice, and the noticing hurts. You try to give back little pieces of childhood where you can. A half hour of play, a saved sweet, permission to read after chores, a joke at the sink, a birthday remembered, a hand on the shoulder that says you see the child beneath the helper. But need has a strong grip. It praises children for becoming useful and then forgets to apologize for asking. There may be arguments too. An older child wants more freedom because he brings in money. A daughter resents being kept home with younger siblings while a brother goes out. A son wants to leave for work somewhere else, perhaps with other boys, perhaps toward a city, a camp, a railroad, or a rumour. You fear the road. You fear keeping him. Parenting an older child in hard times means standing between protection and necessity, and discovering that both sides have reasonable arguments. By evening, the oldest child is tired in a way that looks too adult. He washes hands cracked by cold. She falls asleep beside the baby she was supposed to be watching. You cover them gently and see again the roundness still in the face, the lashes on the cheek, the child not yet finished becoming. Tomorrow you may ask for help again. You may have to, but tonight in the quiet you understand the bargain clearly. The household gained a worker before it was ready to lose a child. You move through the darkened house after the children are finally asleep, touching the back of a chair, the edge of a table, the stove gone quiet, the folded clothes, the jar of buttons, the lunch pails, the mended shoes, and the pantry shelf that will have to answer again tomorrow. The day has been measured in portions, patches, errands, worry, jokes, soap, dust, school books, rent, relief, radio voices, and small acts of courage so ordinary no one will put them in a museum. You listen to the children breathing under blankets and understand why parents kept going even when the world offered very little applause. The house is poor in money, rich in demands, and temporarily peaceful. For tonight, everyone is still here. In hard times, that can feel almost luxurious. The lamp is turned low, or perhaps there is no lamp now, only the shape of the room remembered by your hands. You know where the chair sits because you have moved around it 100 times with laundry, coal, a baby, a pot, a worry, or a child attached to your skirt. You know which floorboard complains. You know which drawer sticks. You know which cup is cracked and must be placed toward you at breakfast so no child cuts a lip on the country's financial mood. The house at night is honest in a way daylight cannot afford. It does not pretend the pantry is full. It does not pretend the rent is easy. It does not pretend the shoes will last forever, the cough will not return, or the oldest child is still as carefree as you wish. But it also does not ask for an explanation. It simply holds the sleeping. That may be why parents move quietly through rooms after children sleep, checking not only blankets and windows, but the fragile proof that another day has been carried across. In one room, a child lies sideways, having rejected the pillow for reasons known only to sleep. In another, 2 children share a bed with the diplomatic arrangement of elbows and knees that will fail by dawn. The youngest breathes through an open mouth, cheeks soft, hair damp from bath night or summer heat. The older child, the useful one, sleeps too deeply, as if the body has finally filed a complaint. You tuck a blanket around a shoulder. You move a lunch pail from the floor. You lift a shoe and set it by its mate, because even shoes deserve companionship after the day they have had. All around you are objects that have worked beyond their station. The button tin has preserved wardrobes and possibly morale. The broom has fought dust in a long war with poor prospects. The sewing basket has kept knees, elbows, cuffs and pride from opening further. The stove has transformed beans, potatoes, scraps, water, and optimism into meals that children accepted because hunger has manners when trained young enough. The radio, now silent, has spoken the nation into the parlour and then gone dark like a guest who left before washing cups. The jars on the shelf hold summer. The coat by the door holds tomorrow's cold. The table holds scratches from homework, cutting, sorting, counting, and all the meals that were smaller than the appetite waiting for them. You may think of other families tonight. The ones doubled up in crowded rooms, the ones walking west, the ones in towns where factories are quiet, the ones in dust bowl houses with cloth over windows, the ones facing relief clerks, landlords, unpaid bills, unfair rules, and social judgments that arrive neatly dressed. You may not know their names, but the decade has made many kitchens cousins. Still, this is not a story only of sorrow. That would be too simple, and frankly the past has rarely been considerate enough to be simple. There has been laughter today too. A child wearing a saucepan, a radio joke, a birthday candle saved for another year, a patch denied in public by mutual agreement, a spoon of jam, a neighbour's soup, a row of jars sealing with little clicks of approval. Children have played, quarrelled, helped, complained, invented kingdoms, and asked for seconds with the optimism of ambassadors from a better country. You have answered as gently as you could. Sometimes you were patient, sometimes you were not. Hard times do not turn parents into perfect figures. They turn them into tired people doing the next necessary thing, which is less decorative and more impressive. At the pantry, you pause. There is enough for breakfast, perhaps. Enough if sliced carefully, enough if stretched, enough if the children do not wake ravenous, which is a bold request to make of children. You close the cupboard quietly. The darkness settles around the room. Outside, the street, farmyard, camp, or road lies still for the moment. Tomorrow will bring work, worry, sweeping, feeding, bargaining, mending, waiting, and the 1,000 small performances by which adults convince children the world is safer than it feels. But not yet. For now, there is only breathing, wood cooling, cloth folded, and the strange peace of a house that has not solved its troubles but has tucked them in for the night. You count the children once more, not because you need to, but because counting them is the one kind of arithmetic that still feels generous. And now, you can let the house grow quiet. You have spent this long, soft stretch among oatmeal pots, lunch pails, patched knees, worn shoes, schoolrooms, gardens, canning jars, rented rooms, relief lines, radio voices, dust storms, crowded beds, homemade birthdays, careful Christmas mornings, and children who learned far too early that grown-up worry could sit at the table without being invited. You've seen how raising children during the Great Depression was not one simple story, but thousands of kitchens, farms, tenements, cabins, streets, camps, and crowded rooms trying to keep small bodies fed, clothed, washed, warm, and hopeful while the larger world misplaced its balance. There was hardship there, and unfairness, and systems that helped some families more easily than others. There were mothers stretching soup, fathers walking home from another day without work, older children becoming useful before anyone was ready, and little ones turning tin cans, string, dust, and cardboard into kingdoms because childhood, thankfully, has always been stubborn. We can be grateful now for the quiet miracles that are easy to overlook: full cupboards, running water, warm rooms, doctors we can call, shoes that fit, school lunches, clean blankets, and the simple modern luxury of not having to make one orange carry the emotional weight of an entire holiday. But gratitude does not need to make us smug. It can simply make us gentler. The people who lived through those years were not quaint figures in old photographs. They were tired, funny, worried, proud, practical human beings doing the next necessary thing, often with fewer tools, fewer choices, and much less applause than they deserved. So let the pantry door close, let the broom rest, let the radio go quiet, let the children in that faraway house sleep under their patched blankets, counted, covered, and loved. And let yourself return slowly to your own room, your own bed, your own soft present. The hard years are behind us for tonight. You are safe here. The lights are low. The house is still. Rest now and sleep well.